Thank you, Paul Maiteny, for joining me this morning, this beautiful morning. I am excited to have a chat with you about how you're currently working clinically with your clients as we pass through this pandemic. To get us started, I wondered if you could give us an overview of how you work and what the main influences are in your work, and then we can move on to the now.
I work in a fairly mainstream kind of conventional way, talking therapy, work drawing on creative imagination as far as it emerges from the person I'm working with, dreams, images, metaphors, so on, following where the person is coming from. I always have in the back of my mind, because I started off as an ecologist and then as an anthropologist in response to various questions I had, well, since I was very, very young. So I always have in the back of my mind an ecosystemic perspective. In other words, the person as part of a bigger body, if you like, part of a bigger whole, including the planet, the planetary ecosystem, and a sense, listening out for where is the person finding their sense of meaning in life? Is it from a sense of what I call a consuming mode, trying to, as it were, fill up this unfillable gap, existential gap of meaning that we all have, I think we all have? Or are there other ways of trying to find meaning in life, such as asking the question, and with an awareness that we are part of a bigger, we are empirically, literally part of a bigger body. There is no getting away from that in biological terms. Mm-hmm. But there is a psychological, spiritual, existential way of experiencing that whole in a part ofness sort of way. How do I contextualize myself? How do I find meaning from discerning what is my place? What is my part within that? And from that, in that, I also draw on many psychospiritual traditions, many of which are pointing towards the same basic question, human question, existential, transpersonal, more than human, more than personal question, yes, and more than human question, of where do I fit in? How do I discern where I fit in to this bigger system? Other species, they do it automatically. A bird doesn't, as far as we know, a bird doesn't think in great depth about how to move from here to there. But somehow humans, we go through great agonies about finding our direction in life, our spiritual direction, our career direction, whatever it might be. And so these are some of the frameworks that I keep in mind. Of course, I also keep early life questions in mind, as all psychotherapists, I would say, do, as to the extent to which a sense of inherent, you could say, I'm trying to avoid the word authentic, but in a sense it is an authentic sense of meaningfulness in oneself, how that may have been veneered over through childhood responses to anxiety. I have one new person who expressly came to me because of my approach, who was in her area, she was a very early, very severe, what do I call her? Victim? Anyway, she became ill, very severely ill with the virus, and was not going to make it. As she started to come through, she wanted to engage with me. And this has had a transformative effect on her. It's affirmed various kind of. She is ecologically orientated. She has a psychospiritual orientation, and she has felt culturally inhibited from really engaging in a practical way. I don't know whether to call this crisis. It's a crisis and an opportunity that the opportunity that the virus has given us to use this pause, this slowdown, this lockdown, but it's a slowdown, right? It's a slowdown. To really reflect on what makes for a good life. And she's really taken that. She's really taken that in hand, and is of her own accord engaging in this synergy, or this almost parallel between being part of an ecosystem, part of this bigger body we call the ecosystem or planet Earth, and the spiritual questions that she's had about where the things I was describing earlier. How do I fit in? Where do I fit in? What's being asked of me? She's phrasing it in these sorts of ways. Because this virus has nearly killed her. More than once. She was in the hospital being told she would not come out more than once.
Wow, that's...
With two, with small children. That's been a very powerful experience. But we have only just started working together. Watch the space,
Yeah, so it seems to me, it's almost how close a client may come to the threat of the virus, and then what the impact is.
I think the immediacy of the virus on personal health and life is a huge difference to it. It distinguishes it enormously from the more kind of diffuse impact of extinction in our world. It's been quite a surprise for me that people haven't made the connection more between the corona illness and the ecosystemic illness that we're all in. I've asked myself, well, if the government said to us, in 5 years' time, if we don't stop now, in 5 years' time, we are going to be severely affected by ecological breakdown, ecological holocaust. I call it holocaust. I feel a need to use that term because I come from the background of Holocaust survivors, and when 70% of insects and 40% of mammals and other animals have disappeared, this is Holocaust dimensions. And we are. It surprised me that people haven't made the connection between the virus as part of the ecosystem, as it were, flooding into the human world, and the ecosystem as the metaphor of floods applies there as well, that we are risking flooding the planet through rising sea levels, through disrupting the climate, that these connections aren't made more, but maybe they are beginning to be made. This person, who I've just been describing, she finds it very hard she can't not think about it, to that extent where she's changing her life in quite radical ways, and struggling with how to do that. But knows she has to, for her own sanity, really, her own mental health. She can't continue to live without taking account of the everyday impacts of her decisions on the ecosystem. She can't live anymore without taking that into account. in quite immediate ways, everyday ways. How much paper do I use? Plastic? Do I use plastic? Plastic pens? Who thinks of that?
Yeah.
Do I use a plastic pen or do I use a pencil that actually gets reabsorbed back into the ecosystem? These are not just ecological niceties. These are accumulatively they're ecological severities. But they're also, because we are part of the ecosystem, they also are psychological. They're psychologically impactful too. In sometimes subtle, but sometimes very, very blatant ways. Some people, the borderlanders, if you like.
Yeah, it is interesting as well how, as we humans suffer from the virus, there's lots of resource becoming available so that less people die, which is what we really need. But there's limited resource going towards saving the planet. And ultimately, we'll all die if we don't do that. So what is it about the ability to act when there's an immediate threat, but the ability to ignore when the threat seems not relevant and not present enough?
We are, as well as being human, we are creatures that share the same instincts as other creatures have said. So when there is an immediate threat to my existence, I'm going to react with this instinct, which is about protecting myself from harm. I don't know the extent to which other species can be aware. I just literally, none of us really know the extent to which other species can be as conscious as humans of rising sea levels, they're not creating the problem. We know that we're creating the problem. We know what we're doing. But the power of this immediate survival instinct that we all have is so strong that when that's the default. That's default that we that's the line of least resistance, if you like. But it's all about me. I think this virus is giving us or can give us the opportunity to think about it not being all about us. We are a species, however much other species can as well. We are a species that can say, I am part of something bigger. It's not all about me. I actually have a part to play in it. But I think it's an open question as to what generates that shift from an all about me, a me-ness mentality, to one that recognizes my part within something bigger, and therefore the impact of my decisions, of my everyday actions, of my everyday behavior, which is generally orientated towards my own self-interest. But what is the impact of that on the bigger system, which I'm a member of, which I participate in, and which I depend on? It's an open question. I don't know. I spent my whole life wondering about what makes the difference between someone who cannot seem to or will not move from this consuming orientation to one that asks, well, what part do I play? And that's important. It's an important question, though, for psychotherapy, a very, very important one. And it's one that we as a species have been trying to ask ourselves for thousands of years. It's there encoded within old traditions, the kind of what I like to think of as the pre-psychotherapy psychotherapies. What had the psychotherapeutic function in cultures before there was psychotherapy within these psychospiritual traditions. But whenever people have come along and said, hang on a minute, you need to think about the plagues, you need to think about the impacts of your action on your context. Not necessarily using this sort of language, but it's there. These people have been ostracized and persecuted by the masses. I think because of the power of this growth instinct and this self-orientated instinct.
It could be that it's related to early attachment difficulties, and to really sort of simplify, something about feeling disconnected at the beginning of life and then living this in this very individualized society, and then not being able to sort of reintegrate into, to recognize that we are all interconnected, because there was no interconnection, there was no intersubjective connection from being
a baby. It could do, and I'm sure that is a factor. Whether it's as deterministic as that, I'm not sure. Because I have to look at myself as an example. You know, my early life was not exactly. It was quite traumatic, my early life. But for whatever reason, my response to that was one of enhancing my sense of connection to something bigger. There are different responses, different defenses, and I'm not sure that attachment theory or any other theory can be a definite explanation that covers all eventualities. There is also there is something to be explained as to why some people have responded one way or another.
I just feel that there must be a strong, you said the word ecos means home, and it makes me think of home as the planet, home as the place where we live, home as the body, home as the mother's body, and all those kind of interconnections. And how if we placed more emphasis on home as a society at whatever stage, then we might be able to engage in our interconnectedness and in looking after.
Yes, we might. There's this question, you're doing this. There is this question as to what's behind any particular person's focus on which degree of home. Is it just very immediate family? Is it my culture, my identity, my society? Is it my nationality? How far are we actually defining our boundary of this system, which I identify myself as being part of? I think there is still something of an unknown as to what generates a sense of being part of any of these degrees of home.
Yeah.
Even beyond the planetary. Okay, the old traditions talk about the cosmic, the divine, which, I think the planet is enough. The planet is an expression of whatever else is out there, if anything. The planet is the body, the physical body that empirically we're part of. But what leads someone to actually identify to that extent as a member of that system, I'm not sure I still can say what that is. Jerome Bernstein talks about childhood trauma as being a portal. He just uses the word portal for this sense of being a member of the planet that as it were is an organ for the planet itself to experience its own pain. And that's a very real thing for some people. This person I've been describing, she feels like it's such a painful, such a depth, that she is part of the planet. And then there are other people for whom that really doesn't make much sense. There's the pullback to self-interest. Then there is the I don't know whether to call it a pull in some other direction, but there seems to be for some people a pull towards service to the bigger system. We see it so much. Well, look at people in the NHS; it's just incredible.
Yeah.
And then there are those who simply cannot but feel in service to something even bigger than the human dimension.
Yeah.
And then there are others that don't. But I'm not sure there's a clear explanation as to what makes the difference. If we don't find our place, if we don't, or place some, have some sense that it's necessary to find our place as participants in the ecosystem, no amount of trying to manage it, I think, is going to be powerful enough to bring about the sorts of behavioral change, behavioral change that really needs to be embodied, not just cognitive, but actually embodied, that I feel myself to be a part of it, to bring about the change that is necessary to balance, regulate the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a big societal piece of mourning and passing through something difficult and challenging in order to find a new way. And I think that is something that most people don't want to have to do, to touch into those difficult places. Which is why, you know, the work that psychotherapists do is so important, to be able to hold people as they pass through this.
It is. And I think it's important that psychotherapists recognize that in doing that, they are doing it not simply for the human, but for the ecos.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I don't know the extent to which psychotherapists are framing it in that sort of way, but I think it's important that we start to, because we're not doing it just for ourselves. We're doing it as members of a bigger system. What are we mourning? What is it? Just is the mourning that psychotherapists help to hold people in? This is not about campaigning for the environment. This is about expanding our analysis of what it is to be human, and what it is to be a planet and members of an ecosystem. It's ecosystemic psychotherapy.
Yeah. Well, fascinating, important work. And we're at the end of the interview now, and I wondered if there's anything else that you wanted to share that felt important just before we close.
I think I've come to a place in my work, having gone from, as I say, from ecology through anthropology, the ecological, the cultural, into the psychological, and always having this sense of ecological crisis throughout my life, living through it. And then nowadays it's come into the public forum. But it's not about saving the world. It's actually about finding our place. There's a deeply psychotherapeutic, psychospiritual work, that to find that I sometimes say that it's about emotional sustainability, not just ecological sustainability, that in finding our place within the bigger system, this is not something that's preordained. This is something that we have to inquire into within ourselves. How can I contribute?
Yeah.
But that's a sort of almost that's the work.
Yeah.
And it's a work that, in a sense, is also perhaps a prerequisite to the regulation of the ecological systems of the planet. So it really is about seeing ourselves as a sort of organ, a cell, as it were. In doing that, we do have a deeper sense of meaning and purpose and kind of role for ourselves in our life. It generates, it makes for a more meaningful life.
I really like the idea of reframing what it is to be an eco-activist, and that actually, in order to be an eco-activist, you have to find your place. So you have to, which is your place within your interpersonal relationships, within your community, within the wider picture. And then implicitly, you're more likely to be doing the right thing for the planet.
Right, that's right, that's right. It's psychoecology. It's the psyche as part of the ecosystem. We
Yeah.
are in a world dominated everywhere we go by human impacts.
Yeah.
The evidence of human impact. We can't say anymore that the psyche is not part of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So it's psychology.
Yeah.
Psychology, not eco tacked on to psychology.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's just what's coming to mind is this idea of, you know, how people say, you know, to know what it is that you haven't sort of processed, whatever it is that irritates you or bothers you about the people around you is probably the thing about yourself that needs work. Well, it's almost like, can we look at the planet as a reflection of where we're at and what we're doing, and see the damage and the destruction and think, oh, you know, maybe I shouldn't use cling film. Maybe I should, you know, all those kind of small things that we do in the home in a response.
Absolutely. That I sometimes say that attention to every little thing that I do, and whether it's contributing to the integrity of the ecosystem or its disintegration, is an everyday psychological practice, psychospiritual practice, if you like. It's not something I'm doing for the planet.
No.
It's something that actually helps me to feel a sense of integrity and a contribution to the integrity of it's like taking care of your own body. If you don't cut your toenails properly, well, you know, it's going to get sore.
Yeah.
Just to use
if you don't nourish yourself, you know, if you don't eat good food or.
That's right. Yeah. But eat good food in a way that is also nourish the planet. So it's possible to eat good food that is imported from the other side of the world. That it might be good food, but how is it produced? What is its wider impact on the people and the species where it is produced and in the ways that it is produced? It's complex. It's quite complex. It's not just about feeding myself healthily. It's about nourishing the planet healthily, because I'm a part of the planet. But I can be so focused on myself that I forget that I'm a part. I'm a toenail of the planet, as it were.
Yeah.
Or a heart of the planet.
It's interesting that we've sort of come all the way here when really we were intending to talk about your clinical work in the context of the virus, but it seems to me that the virus may trigger in some people, as you mentioned in one of your clients, a deeper connection and a realization of how fragile we are, and how much work there is to be done to create a sense of a future in the long term.
I think it's quite interesting that the virus is called the corona. In other words, the crown or the halo. What a grand name for a thing that is causing so much chaos, or what we think of as chaos, but potentially offering us these amazing opportunities to rethink what we are, how we are, what makes for a good life. And it strikes me that, as far as we're told, it came through a bat. The virus came through a bat, as if to highlight. Okay, we don't know what sort of bat it was, or I don't. But the extent to which we have, this is a strong word, but the extent to which we have vampirized the planet for so long. I feel quite emotional saying that. Where there were so many symbolic uh, um, synchronicities, if you like, that we could be finding meaning through for ourselves,
Mm,
in terms of changing our ways.
mm.
It's a
Yeah,
choice. It always has to be a choice.
it's a choice, and I suppose, well, I know that more people, some people will have more capacity to do that than others. Those that are homeless, those that are very, very ill right now, healthcare workers. I think that really these ideas are circulating in consciousness, and we just hope that more people will be impacted. And
It's incredibly complex how it's all going to work through.
yeah, no, thank you very much.
You're welcome.